When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Skims or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/income.
Hi everyone, I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening. Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg, and I'm your host of Yoga Birth Babies. And today we're going to talk about sleep, your baby's sleep, how to help your baby get a good night's sleep. So we're going to talk about sleep deprivation and the impact of maternal mental health and bonding with baby. We're also going to talk about the different type of sleep training methods, because sometimes sleep training gets a bad rap and is perhaps misunderstood. And of course, the benefits of having your child learn to sleep independently. So to have this conversation, I have Liza Kaplan Montanino. Let me tell you a little bit about Liza. She's a dual certified pediatric and special needs sleep consultant through the Center of Pediatric Sleep Management and Institute of Pediatric Sleep and Parenting. She's also a graduate of the Sleep Health Intelligence Program, a co-founder of the Westchester Mama and Child Health Expo, and a sleep expert in the Indy's Lab Parenting Center. Liza is also a sleep instructor with Virtual Village Parenting, a newborn care professional, and lactation educator. She is quite knowledgeable at sleep, and I have to tell you, I loved this conversation because I joke that sleep is one of my favorite pastimes, but it actually is. It's one of my favorite things because I know when I get a good night's sleep, I am just nicer to be around. My brain functions better. I'm less snappy. And we often talk about new parents as kind of have this meme of like, oh, you're a new parent, you're tired, but it can really affect you and affect just your well-being. So I'm excited for you to hear this conversation so you can get some really solid tips to help you sleep and help your child or children sleep. Before we get to my conversation with Liza, I always like to give some updates about what's happening at Prenatal Yoga Center. So as we head into the holidays, just keep an eye on our holiday schedule because we just modify it a little bit around Christmas and New Year's. And we still are doing classes online 7 days a week, which is such a wonderful gift. And I'm so happy we can offer that. And then we have in-person classes 6 days a week. Our workshop schedule is full and we are filling up these classes. So make sure if you're in the New York City area, you jump on that early. And if you're not, we have all these same workshops on demand. So it's the same quality of workshop that you take on demand on your timing, on your schedule. Last thing I want to talk about is our teacher training. I can't believe we've already done 2 of our trainings this year. They have been full. They have been fun. I love these. Not only do I love leading these trainings, because I feel like every time I lead it, I think of something new and learn something new, but I love that we're taking the Prenatal Yoga Center methodology all around the world. So that's really exciting. We have 2 more coming up. We have another online January, February. And then we've got the in-studio in New York City in March and April, and then our online postnatal teacher training in May. So much. And of course, we even have our next year's plan. So you can check the website for all that, prenatalyogacenter.com. And again, always a thank you to you for listening. And my request is to please leave a rating and review so people can find us. The last thing I want to ask of you, our community, our listeners, is if you have a topic or maybe you're a person that would be a great guest, let me know. I am here to have really interesting conversations that can continue to enrich our community. So if that's you, you think you'd be a great guest, go ahead and submit an application on our website, prenatalyogacenter.com. Okay, I think that's enough of me. Let's take a quick break and when we come back, please enjoy my conversation with Liza.
Interrompemos esse podcast para perguntar: quem você quer ser?
Designer, engenheira, pedagoga,
administrador.
Quer saber? O Senac EAD é nota máxima no MEC. Tem cursos de diversas áreas, com conteúdo elaborado por especialistas do mercado e professores mestres e doutores. Ainda tem o Senac Carreiras, conectando estudantes a vagas de emprego em todo o país. Saiba mais em ead.senac.br/graduação.
Hi, Liza. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you, Deb? Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, thank you. I'm really excited and I'm doing great. So I'm really excited to jump into this topic. I love that we're talking about sleep because it's one of my favorite activities. I love sleep. I love getting in bed and kind of curling up for a good night's sleep. So let's dive in. So I guess what I want to start with is just learning a little bit more about you and what led you to focusing on sleep.
Sure. So I've never been a good sleeper personally. It's a joke in my family. My parents learned the hard way that, I just did not ever want to sleep. So they did a great job sleep training my sisters, but I did not have the same ease with sleep growing up. And then when I became a parent, I really didn't know all that went into sleep. My first was a complete unicorn sleeper. So I really came to understand the importance of sleep as a second-time mom with my son because we really struggled. Things that I really took for granted with my first, who could just fall asleep very easily on her own, whether it was nap time or bedtime, were really a struggle with my son. And because he wasn't sleeping, I wasn't sleeping either. And that really took a toll on my mental health. And, I was struggling with postpartum depression and anxiety. And it really wasn't until I hired a sleep consultant and got my son's sleep under control. And then, I was able to sleep again, that I really felt like I could show up to parenthood as the kind of mom that I wanted to be, and also know that he was getting the sleep he needed to grow and thrive.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I wonder if you thought with your first one, when you heard maybe your friends being like, oh, I'm so tired, my baby's not sleeping. You're like, what are you talking about? It's so easy.
I definitely had that guilt of like, oh God, I'm so sorry. I don't want to be that person who's like, well, I wish I could commiserate, but I can't. But we all get it in the end in some way.
So let's start with simply breaking down, because you mentioned that you were not sleeping. So let's break down the impact of not getting enough sleep. And it's not just for a night or two. We're talking like this long-term sleep deprivation of having a newborn.
Right. Yeah, it is definitely cumulative. I think those first few days that you're home, you're in this state of bliss and you might be able to get by on very broken sleep. But when it goes on for weeks and months, in many cases, it makes you realize why sleep deprivation is used as a form of torture. It really impacts every single facet of your life and health. So if you are not sleeping, you have a really, really difficult time regulating your own emotions. You have a really difficult time having the physical energy, of course, to get through the day. But one thing that I really did not understand until I was going through it was the impact on my mental health and the difficulty in making decisions, in feeling confident about what I was doing on a regular basis. My immune system really started to suffer. There's so many ways that sleep benefits us that I think we don't really take note of until we have to go without. And so it's one thing to know that your baby should be sleeping for, let's say, like up to 20 hours a day when they're first born. But for a parent, especially for the birthing parent, sleep is just as crucial to your physical recovery as it is to your mental health, and the toll that it takes on a woman's body in general. If she's not sleeping, you see that play out across the family dynamics, because if mom is not, protecting her mental health and her sleep, it's really difficult to be there for your baby in the way that they deserve and the way that you want to show up for them.
That's really interesting because I feel like it's not talked about the healing part of the birthing parent. That, like right now, my son broke his wrist playing soccer.
No.
I know. And we're big rock climbers. That really is unfortunate. But he is 13 and he's on his own little, like, I'm going to stay up late at night. And I am the crazy person who loves sleep. So I'm like, sleep and vegetables. That's what's going to heal your body.
Yes.
And so like in my mind, I'm like, sleep is the medicine.
It is.
And I feel like we often talk about the sleep for baby, but whoever did, like that birthing parent's body went through a huge transformation, and sleep is the part of that medicine of healing that I think is often ignored.
Absolutely. Well, there's such an intense hormone fluctuation that happens obviously throughout pregnancy, but especially in the early postpartum period. And sleep is one of the ways that we're able to help rebalance. So if we aren't getting sleep, it's going to be that much harder to recover all around.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned it, but I want to go a little bit more into this, about that maternal mental health. So how does sleep deprivation impact maternal mental health? Because I would also think would affect bonding and the ability to care for the new baby.
Yes. So that's one of the things that I think is often misunderstood about sleep in general. There is, if we do not get at least 5 hours of continuous sleep, that is the minimum that we need in order for our mental health to be protected. So if you have a baby who is waking up every sleep cycle, or maybe every 2 hours, you are not actually giving your body and brain the opportunity to enter slow wave sleep, which is the really restful and restorative sleep that our bodies need in order to recharge, in order for our metabolism to, to sort of work in the way that it's meant to. We also need that sleep in order to respond emotionally and regulate our own emotions. So for a person who is not sleeping deeply for a long enough period, their body's going to remain much more in a fight or flight state than it is rest and digest. And that amount of pressure on the nervous system makes it really, really difficult to feel like you're able to get to a place of calm. So if you are always in this heightened state, it makes it really difficult to feel that you can take on the day. It might exacerbate or, make little things feel way disproportionate. So there are so many benefits to quality sleep. In one of the other ways too, for both babies and adults, is that with this slow wave sleep and this deep sleep, that is how we are pruning the memories and the things that we really don't need to hold on to. And our brain is latching onto things that we do need to process.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I was just thinking, my husband's going to hate me for sharing this, but at one point he was snoring a lot and he got this like little machine thing. And I was realizing that I was waking up from his snoring. And now that he has this little machine thing to help him sleep, I realize that I'm much nicer. And so I'm just thinking about what that's like for new parents, especially maybe it's a second time parent and maybe they have like a 2 or 3 year old, and that takes a special kind of patience. And then you have a new baby. And so I'm just thinking of kind of that mental wear and tear of if you're not getting good sleep and you're running on reserves, you're just not going to be as grounded and as patient and as available.
Absolutely not. Well, and the other thing too is there's such a big difference between a baby who is crying in the middle of the night and has a need that actually needs to be addressed versus even a baby who's just sort of like making fussing noises but doesn't necessarily need support in the moment. That can almost be just as maddening because you don't actually have to get up and assess the situation, but yet you're still awake because they are making noise. So a lot of what I see is parents wondering, like, when is the right time to move my baby to their own room? When is it safe to do that? How do I know if they need support and help overnight, or when is it okay to pause and observe and give them a little bit of space? So, all of these things tend to grow and change as a baby does, but definitely having a partner who is waking you up makes it very hard to roll over and say good morning and really mean it.
Exactly. Yeah. He's like, sometimes you're mean at night. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, sometimes you deserve it. All right. So anyway,
Right.
So why do you think it's been normalized to expect that new parents and babies to be living in this state of poor sleep quality? I feel like every time I talk to anyone, it's kind of like this joke, like, oh, I'm just so tired. I'm so tired. And it's like memes on Instagram that everyone's just so tired. And we've just recognized as like, you're a parent, of course. But that, as we've talked about, that's not good for your mental state, but we've normalized it.
We really have. And I'm trying so hard to work against that rhetoric because I do think there's also a really big difference between being tired and being sleep deprived, right? There's a difference between being exhausted and actually being in a state of sleeplessness. You are going to be exhausted because of the changes that your body is going through and the physical demands. But that doesn't mean that you should just be awake and on high alert 23 hours a day. And I think when we tell moms to expect that they're just not going to sleep for the first couple of years, what we're really doing is giving moms permission to excuse any kind of poor sleep without really investigating what the root cause might be. And some of this comes down to access to information, I think. And of course, there are also a lot of cultural differences that come into play. Some cultures have a really different approach to safe sleep and to the way and the where that sleep happens. But I think universally, we tell moms that if you're not sleeping, that means like it's because you're meeting your baby's needs and you're being a good parent. Therefore, if you're not happy with the way your baby is sleeping and you vocalize wanting to make changes, we're going to judge you and we're going to shame you for that. And that's really where I take issue with the division of, yes, we are pro sleep training. No, we're not. Because needing sleep is completely universal. It is not a luxury. Sleep is not self-care. It is a basic biological need that our brains and bodies are not meant or capable of functioning without. And so when we do start to treat it as something that is like a bonus or a nice to have, I think we're really doing ourselves a disservice. Because there is so much that we can do to lay foundations for healthy sleep right from birth. And if we start sharing more of that kind of information, then I think parents would feel a little bit more equipped to make decisions that really prioritize not just their baby's sleep, but their sleep as well.
So let's actually dive into that, because something you said just perked my ears up, laying the foundation for sleep from birth. What are some of those, like, how does someone do that? What are some of the pieces to lay that foundation?
So one of the main things, babies are born still with mom's melatonin in their system. So they're really, really sleepy for the first 2 to 3 weeks. Once they wake up, though, they do need a little bit more help in sleeping. And because they love that skin to skin contact. It's very easy for a baby to fall asleep when they are nursing or when they are feeding or just if they are on a parent. It is that body contact. It's that oxytocin release. Whether you're breastfeeding or bottle feeding, there is that natural sucking reflex that is triggered when a nipple touches the roof of a baby's mouth. And that immediately engages the vagus nerve, which triggers the parasympathetic nervous system. So that is going to put the baby in a state of calm and help them fall asleep. These are things that we don't necessarily know. We just think, oh, okay, well, feeding works to help my baby fall asleep. So I'm going to do that until it stops working. But there are other things that you can do to actually help set your baby up so that they might be able to fall asleep with less direct assistance from you. And one of the ways to do that is simply to place your baby down before they fall asleep. We want to swaddle them first if you are going to put them down because they're born with such a strong startle reflex that if you put your baby down the second after they fall asleep in your arms, they're most likely going to flail and wake themselves up the second that their body touches the mattress because it's a huge shift in position going from, being chest down on you to suddenly being on their back. There's going to be that physiological response. But you can, from day one, you can practice keeping your baby alert during their feed, swaddling them, and putting them down when they're awake, and then doing some very heavy crib side soothing to get them to fall asleep in their sleep space so that you don't have to make that transfer later on. And that can be as simple as shushing your baby, patting or jiggling their belly. If they're in a snoo, the snoo does a lot of that work for you. It has the white noise and it moves from side to side. Those are some of the same sensations that parents can create for their baby. And for a baby that's falling asleep in their sleep space at the outset, whether that is at bedtime or for naps, and they're swaddled, their startle reflex is suppressed. They're falling asleep where you want them to wake up. It's going to be that much easier for them to get continuous consolidated stretches of sleep right from the get-go.
What you're describing is something, I have a friend who happens to be a sleep trainer. And so when I had my first child, she gifted us her services, which was
how amazing.
It was, I just have to honestly say, it was life-changing. And I know that sounds like I'm being dramatic because I do have a propensity to that. But up to that point before, we were living in a one-bedroom on the Upper West Side, and the crib was in our room. And so I remember nursing my son to sleep. He was completely asleep. I didn't know any differently. I would put him in the crib and slither away, be like, don't wake the baby. And then when Jess taught me, she's exactly what you said, don't let him be completely asleep. I think she called it an alert, but sleep, a restful alert or something like that.
Calm but awake.
Yeah, calm but awake. Feed him, swaddle, change his diaper, swaddle him, put him in, but he's not asleep. And then she called it less to most, don't do a ton and see what happens. And then listen, should there be cries again, or kind of the least to most. And when we learned to do that around, I think it was around 3 months, it just changed everything because he was going to bed at 6:30 as opposed to 9:30.
Right.
It made such a difference in my mental state. My husband's we got to hang out with each other again.
Right.
It changed our lives. But when I told people, because we did the exact same thing with my daughter, when I told people we were sleep training, I got a lot of kind of side eye. So I feel like sleep training's a bit misunderstood. What do you think?
I completely agree. I think it has really become synonymous with cry it out. And if that's what you think sleep training is, then I can understand why some parents might have a really strong reaction to hearing that, especially when your baby is, 12 weeks old. But sleep training truly is the process of teaching your child to fall asleep and fall back asleep independently. That's what it means. And there are many different approaches to doing that. So cry it out, or it's sometimes called extinction, is one end of the spectrum. It is like the most direct, it is the most hands-off, it is the most efficient. But there are so many other ways of going about that process. And I think for most people who don't know that you can actually be completely present for your baby if you want, you can pick up and put them down, especially in that fourth trimester. The pick up, put down method where you are picking your baby up when they're upset and then helping calm them down, then placing them down again. That method can be really effective. When your baby is a little bit older, some parents will do, shushing and patting and transition that into less and less support, giving their baby more opportunity to try to get comfortable in the crib in between those shushing and patting sessions. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing. And most of the families that I work with and the people who come to me seeking support with sleep training do not want cry it out, because that takes a lot less nuance, right? Like you are literally putting your baby down at bedtime, you say goodnight, and you don't return until the morning. You probably don't need a sleep coach if you are comfortable going that route. Mm-hmm. So a lot of what I end up doing is really coaching parents to understand their baby's cues. And so we are listening for the differences in, is your baby expressing panic? Do they sound like they are frustrated and trying? Are they moaning? Are we seeing signs of self-soothing? Are they pausing at all? And determining how to support them and how to respond based on how they are doing is really how I see the most success happen. And I think that we're really doing a disservice every time we don't clarify what extinction or cry it out means. A lot of people will even say, we put her down, we let her cry it out for 20 minutes and it just wasn't working, so we picked her up. That is another improper use of cry it out. That's not what it means. And I think a lot of times people confuse cry it out with any crying that happens throughout the sleep training process. And the truth is, anyone is going to protest something that they don't understand and something that they're not comfortable with and don't like at first. Your baby's only form of communication from birth is to cry. But there really are differences between that panic cry and that, punctuating yells and frustrated cry versus just this like moaning and annoyance while they're trying to figure something out.
Yeah, that's what my friend Jess called like the red alert cry. She's like, start to listen to the nuances for that red alert cry. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, let's break down. I know you talking about the cry it out, but I know there's different type of sleep methods. So let's take a moment when we come back and just go into those and the differences and the different approaches. We'll be right back.
Enquanto você escuta seu podcast favorito, que tal dar uma olhada nos looks da Riachuelo para as festas de fim de ano? Brilhos, transparências, vestidos, conjuntos, temos tudo para todos os eventos. Aqui, toda festa começa com look.
O que vale mais? Um dia difícil ou o carinho do seu pet? Contar com um acaso ou proteger quem você ama? Certas coisas não têm comparação, assim como o Bravecto. O preferido ao redor do mundo garante até 12 semanas de proteção contra pulgas e carrapatos em uma única dose. Bravecto é recomendado por veterinários porque dura mais. É mais proteção e menos preocupação.
We're back. So we have the cry it out method, but what are some of the different sleep training methods and what's the difference between these different approaches to sleep training?
So there are 4 main methods. And as we talked about, extinction or cry it out is sort of like the most efficient, and maybe like abrupt method. But there are some very parent present methods as well. For parents who have been rocking their kids to sleep or have really heavily been relying on movement, one of the first ways that you can break that sleep association and start to work toward independent sleep is with a method called just sit. So instead of rocking or bouncing or swaying with your baby, you are simply holding them in a stationary position until they fall asleep. And then you are transferring them. And over a matter of days, you start to put them down earlier and earlier before they are actually asleep, and then move into shushing them cribside or patting them cribside and offering a bit of verbal and physical assistance, but not being held to sleep anymore. So we're sort of like peeling back the layers and assessing how much more support your baby needs day by day. And the goal with something like that is eventually to get to the point where if your baby gets upset, you are shushing and patting them only until they're calm. And once they're calm, you withdraw that support and you stay there and you observe. And that usually leads to a point where eventually you are putting your baby down. They are not fussing, or they're fussing maybe intermittently, but you can just hang out, in a chair by the door, or you can sit next to the crib and slowly work yourself closer to being out of the room. But with any sleep training method, the main thing to keep in mind is consistency. Just like you are teaching your child one day to walk or to zip their coat or tie their shoe, sleep is actually a skill. And the only way to learn and hone it is through repetition. So for the parent who is trying Ferber or something one night and says it doesn't work, these things take time. They take time and practice in order to become habitual and to become routine. And the good thing is a baby's brain starts becoming receptive to routines at about 12 weeks. So the more you practice implementing whatever sleep training method or any kind of routine consistently, the more your baby will start to recognize certain cues as, okay, so after bath, that means bedtime is near. And that is one of the reasons that we see babies get more and more comfortable over time, so that they're not having this really big emotional response in perpetuity. They just need that time and opportunity to learn and, create that routine. And then it leads to, a baby who's reaching for the crib, or once they're older, saying, I'm tired, and asking to be put down.
Yeah, my kids still have a routine. I mean, it's kind of the same routine we've had since they were little. Like, we shut the screens off, we go upstairs, they take a shower, they brush their teeth. Well, getting my 13-year-old brush his teeth is another story, but then they're in their room and either reading or drawing. But it is still the same routine that we've had for years. And I think it works.
Benefit from one. Yeah.
Yeah. So how does someone figure out which is the best sleep approach for their child?
So I would say this is really a multifaceted answer, because it's going to depend on a few things. One of them is, of course, just what your parenting style is. If you're someone who is really uncomfortable with crying of any kind, and you feel better being physically present for your child's discomfort, then you're probably going to want a more hands-on approach. Those approaches take longer to see real progress, but you're probably going to feel better if you are there throughout. If you are someone who might have a little bit of a bigger emotional bandwidth, and you can tolerate hearing that your child is not comfortable, but also knowing, well, I am going to go in when they need me, then maybe you're someone who wants to give them a little bit more space, and something like a leave and check method would work for you. So it really depends on, your parenting style, but there are also some babies whose temperaments really do not do well if a parent is present, but they're not getting what they want from that parent. So in many situations, I see a little bit of time and space working wonders for babies, especially those who are 6 months and older, who really, who have become used to months and months of a lot of sleep support. knowing that your parent is there and not being able to get the access to them that you want can often be more frustrating and really exacerbate things and backfire.
Is there a window when someone might have missed to sleep train or help their child? I feel like I've heard friends be like, my kid is now 3 and still not sleeping well.
Never. Nope.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, no, there's truly no bad or, wrong time to start working on independent sleep. There are just different ways of going about it and different ways that it's appropriate given your child's age. But I work with families with kids up to 12 years old, and the difficulties really just change over time. At 3, one of the biggest hurdles is really separation. We're asking a toddler to be apart from their caregiver for a really long period of time, potentially after they've already been apart from them for certain periods during the day. And there's not as much impulse control at that age. A lot of kids are also transitioning to beds. And so the ability to get out can really throw a wrench in things. But it's really never too late to redraw some new expectations around sleep. And the older your kids get, the more you can involve them in the process and give them a little bit of choices within like the larger framework that you're setting. So toddlers can be really, really successful. It's just a very different approach.
I remember you said something that totally sparked a memory. I remember when my husband and I transitioned our son to a toddler bed because we had one of those cribs that went from a bassinet to a crib to a toddler bed. So we had made it a toddler bed, and then we had our daughter and we had to buy him a toddler bed and take his crib back. And when we did the transition to the toddler bed, we're like, wait a minute, he can get out now. He can come walk in our room. He actually didn't. But there was that moment of like, wait a minute, there's a lot more freedom now. That was a little surprising. I don't know why we hadn't realized that before.
It really, that can be one of the biggest challenges I find. I had a very similar situation. My daughter actually did not, like, whether or not she realized it, she did not get out on her own. It was, she was a unicorn in so many ways. Of course, my son did. And so we really had to work on some new behaviors around sleep and what was okay and what wasn't, and recognizing that if you are continuing to take your child back to bed every single time they get out, it's going to reinforce those pop-ups out of bed. And so it does take a really clear strategy to get to the other side of that, where you trust that you can put your child down and also know that once they're there, they're going to stay there.
All right, let's talk about some unsafe sleep practices to avoid. I think I know some of them, like don't throw stuffed animals into a crib, but there must be more.
Yes. So this, again, is really going to depend on your cultural beliefs and where you live. I'm based in New York. I tend to follow the American Academy of Pediatrics safe sleep guidelines, and they are very strict about saying that your baby should be sleeping alone, always placed for sleep on their back in a crib or other firm, flat surface. So like a bassinet or a pack and play, but that there be no blankets, no loose sheets, no stuffed animals, as you said, no bumpers, no blankets of any kind, and that you don't expose your baby to smoke. Those are the ABCDs of sleep. But in a lot of cultures, in Europe, a lot of families bed share. That is just the common practice. And so, whereas here, we tend to talk about that as having risks. I mean, the truth is that there are risks with that kind of sleeping in any situation. So those are generally not the kind of setup that I'm going to suggest to a parent, because there's just such a high risk of accidentally rolling on your baby, or if your mattress is not as firm as a baby's mattress or bassinet would be, there are going to be looser sheets. There are just some risks that we don't want to take if we don't have to.
I've talked to some other folks in the past about safe sleep. So I know I've got some links I can include in the show notes about that, because I'm sure people that are listening be like, I want to follow the exact right thing for if they are choosing to co-sleep or some of the safety around that. So thank you for bringing that up.
Of course.
One final question before we start to head off is, one thing we haven't covered is the benefits of a child learning to sleep independently.
Oh my gosh, there are so many. Some of the benefits are not dissimilar to why adults need sleep. Children just need more of it because in the first 5 years, that is the most exponential brain growth. And our brain only grows during sleep, not rest, but actually during sleep. Your baby's body is undergoing so much neurological development and also physical development. These are things that without adequate sleep, some children struggle to reach some physical milestones. Immune health is also a really, really big one. Muscle and tissue repair. You mentioned that your son broke his wrist.
Yeah.
Sleep is absolutely the best thing for injuries and physical health. And as we talked about earlier with adults, babies who are not sleeping or getting the quality stretches of sleep that they need, they're also going to struggle with their emotions. And when we see a baby who is chronically overtired, they are often fussy, they're often difficult to soothe. And all of that is really like the result of a heightened nervous system because the baby is just not getting deep enough quality sleep. As I mentioned earlier, when we are sleeping, that is our brain's opportunity to prune out some of what we're learning that we don't really need, and also consolidating the memories that we do need to hold on to so that we can process and use them day to day. And all of these things are so integral to our kids as they are, growing and learning and physically growing and learning, which is so key to those first 5 years. There really isn't enough that I can say about why sleep is so important for kids, especially once they get to school years, even preschool. For kids who are not getting quality sleep or the quantity of sleep that their body needs, we start to see it impact their behavior and mood and, following directions and listening. So there are really numerous benefits for a child learning to sleep in a healthy, continuous way. And truly, there's no downside to sleep at all. I don't think anyone has ever said, you might be sleeping a little too much. There's a spectrum. So there are some kids that are going to be higher sleep needs, and there are some kids who are going to be lower and might need less than the average. But of course, if that is something you're worried about on either side, consulting your pediatrician is always really helpful, just to make sure that there's nothing medical going on. But there's really no downside to sleep.
And that is why it's one of my favorite activities. Okay, we're going to take another break. When we come back, what is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents? We'll be right back.
Opa! Nada de mosquito aqui nesse podcast. Agora sim, o sistema de proteção mais completo contra mosquitos é com raid no formato aerosol, que elimina de forma rápida, e líquido elétrico que os mantém afastados. Pode ser usado o dia todo, até naquela hora chata, cheia de mosquitos no fim da tarde. É proteção para toda a família. Raid, proteção para todos.
Produzido no Polo Industrial de Manaus. Conheça a Amazônia. Cuidado, perigoso. Antes de usar, leia as instruções do rótulo.
We're back. So I'm curious if you're going to stay with your sleep hat on, if you're going to speak as a parent. So what is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents?
I think I'm going to go a little bit broader than sleep on this one and just say it's a little twofold. One is cut yourself some slack. And two is ask for help. There is no reward for like most exhausted parent. There's no award for most likely to do it all. We need a village. We need support. And whether that is your partner or other family or a caregiver that you hire to help, we need community. We're really not meant to do this alone. And I think the quickest route to maternal burnout, in addition to all of the other things we mentioned, like sleep deprivation and poor mental health, is really trying to do it all and insisting that you've got it when there really should be no shame in asking for help.
That's great. Both pieces are great advice. Where can people find your work?
You can find me on my website, which is www.rockabyebabysleep.com. That has links to get in touch with me if you want to chat about what it could look like to work together one-on-one to improve your child's sleep habits. And then I'm also on Instagram at Liza_rockabybabysleep.
I'll make sure that, of course, is in the show notes. Liza, I really enjoyed this conversation. You gave such great information to new parents out there who all they want is for their peace of mind and their baby to sleep. So thank you for such a great conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
This has been an episode of Yoga Birth Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flashenberg. Thanks for listening.
You were probably expecting one, but got pregnant with two. We get it. Twin Talks encourages moms who are expecting twins as well as experienced moms of multiples. Together, we'll explore the unique challenges new parents face when raising two or more children of the same age. Join us as we embrace the joys of parenting when you've got double the duty. Subscribe through your favorite podcast app or say, "Hey Alexa, play the Twin Talks podcast." And be sure to visit newmommymedia.com to check out our other parenting shows, Preggy Pals, Newbies, Parent Savers, and the Boob Group. Twin Talks, parenting times 2.